Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of your new starter. As you can see, I have my scales set, my flour, water, and this is my starter. Notice I put the date and the demarcation as to where it started. So, getting right into it today, all you're going to do is take your whatever you're using to mix your starter with. I'm using my long spurtles. I haven't done dishes yet today, so all of my mixing equipment is still in the dishwater. So all you're going to do is stir your starter. Ooh, and it's already beginning to stink. I'm not sure if I mentioned that yesterday. It is going to stink to high heaven. But it'll get better. That is the fermentation process. That's the process that your flour is transforming into to make it a leavening agent. So, I forgot my paper towel. So you're just going to stir it. Turn on your scale. Make sure your scale is set to grams. Mine is. You're going to put your jar on the scale and zero it out. Now you're going to add 50 grams of water. Okay, 50 grams of water. And you're going to take it off the scale. You never want to mix on the scale because sometimes that can harm it and sometimes even break it. I've seen creators mess up their scales when they're mixing sourdough and they're doing it on the scale. That's not a good idea. But you're going to mix this until your water is incorporated and it gets thin. Right now, your flour and water from yesterday should be thick. But you shouldn't see any bubbles. You may see 1 or 2 bubbles. It's not necessarily a good or bad thing if you don't see any bubbles. But when you're mixing your water into your starter for the first 4 days, you want to make sure that most of what you made yesterday is incorporated into the water. In other words, you don't want any big chunks of starter in there. You want it to be well mixed. So take as much time as you need to get this incorporated, because when you add your 50 grams of flour, it's going to be thick again. But this is what your starter needs to feed on: water and more flour. So we're going to put it back on the scale. You can zero it out, or you can do the math. I prefer to zero out. A lot of times I don't, and then I'm forced to do the math. It's one of those things where you just can't win. Anyways, you're going to put 50 grams of flour in. I need 4 grams. And you want to be precise. I mean, if you go over 1 or 2 grams, that's not an issue. But you don't want to go over or be under a lot. Okay, we're done with our scale. Take our starter off and mix. And like I said, it's going to become thick. But you just want to make sure that there are no dry pockets of flour. You want your starter or your flour to be well incorporated. And you want to make sure that you're scraping down your sides, because that stuff, when it dries like cement, and you're soaking your jars for days at a crack, hoping that it dissolves and gets, cleaned off, that kind of thing. So again, you want to make sure that your flour is well incorporated. It doesn't have to be smooth. You just don't want any big dry pockets in there. And that includes on the sides. You want like that. That's another reason why you want to scrape your jar down. You don't want those dry bits on there. Oh, excuse me. I have to pick it up so I can see what I'm doing. Otherwise, my head is going to be in the frame. If you don't know, I'm visually impaired, so I have to do a lot of activities like this with my face close. So I can see what I'm doing. And remember, you want to wipe off your utensils. There can be a little bit of flour on there, like, that's not the end of the world right there. But you don't want to have big chunks of starter on your utensils. You definitely want to make sure they're cleaned off before you put them in a dishwasher. You want to make sure that your jars are as empty as possible. Now, I soak my jars every night. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this yesterday, but you will need 2 jars at some point. I shouldn't say at some point. You'll need 2 jars on day 5 when we start discarding. And we'll talk more about that when it comes. But as for today, boy, I didn't do a very good job scraping out, did I? Oh, mercy. Well, you do the best you can with what you have, and that's, that's always been a motto for me. So anyways, you're going to scrape down your jar as best as you can. And then you're just going to set the lid on it. My lid, of course, went flying. Now, you don't want to just, set it. You want to make sure that it's on there. You don't have to twist it to tighten it. Just make sure that it's on there. And of course, there. See, you don't, just make sure it's on there, just to cover it up. But anyways, you want to have 2 jars, because when day 4 comes around, or day 5, excuse me, we will be discarding. And that is it for day 1. You are all done. Or excuse me, day 2. I am just, thank God for editing. You all have a lovely day.